The Chicago Bar Association was created back in 1874 as just a general resource to help attorneys network with each other and be successful in their practices. The CBA chose to set up the insurance subsidiary because a lot of the members were asking questions about what types of insurance they should tap into. Who's the best resource for legal malpractice insurance, life insurance, health insurance, et cetera, et cetera. And rather than sending those elsewhere, we figured we'd be a better resource if we just kept it all in-house and they had a familiar face to work with on a regular basis. And we think that it's very important to get the word out and let our members know that we're around to help as a resource. On top of that, we can work with any law firm or any attorney in the United States. When a law firm comes to us for a second opinion on their legal malpractice insurance policy, we're usually able to find them a lower price for the same coverage or better coverage, or in some instances, actually both. We can find a lower price for better coverage, which is obviously the end goal. Insurance is something that not a lot of people know the ins and outs of it, and maybe a smaller firm or a solo attorney needs that consultant to really keep them in line or to provide information to take it off of their plate. They have enough going on dealing with clients, collecting bills, doing everything that makes them successful in their profession. What I'm here to do is to be a resource and really just provide assistance in something that they are not inherently an expert in.
Welcome to You and the Law, a Chicago Bar Association production focused on issues of law and policy for the benefit of the general public. We have with us today a very special guest, Michelle Carey, who is a lawyer and who has been involved for a long time with the Chicago Bar Association Judicial Evaluation Committee, which, among other things, publishes judicial evaluations for the benefit of the general public and voters every election season. And she's here to share with you, what the committee does, why it's important, why we need to be paying attention to the judicial elections, which sometimes don't get the attention that they probably should, and what we at the Chicago Bar, have been doing for a long time to provide information and resources to the general public and voters so they can make informed decisions. With that, Ms. Carey, thank you very much for being a guest on this episode of You and the Law.
Thank you for having me, Mike. Good morning. So I have actually been involved in this committee for, I think, almost 13 years. I've been practicing law for, it will be 15 years in May. But I've been involved in the legal community for a very long time. I started as a billing clerk at a law firm when I was still in college. And I worked my way up from there to legal secretary to paralegal, and then eventually went to law school and worked full time as a paralegal all day long, and then went to school 4 nights a week for 3.5 years. So I've seen it all, and I love it all. And during my years as a legal secretary and paralegal, I saw that the attorneys that I worked for complain about certain judges that they maybe didn't think were qualified to be on the bench. So when I became a lawyer, I wanted to get involved with the CBA's Judicial Evaluation Committee because I felt like it was really important. So the CBA's Judicial Evaluation Committee has been very near and dear to my heart for a very long time, and I'm very proud to be leading it today. So just to give the public a little history, the CBA has been doing some form of an evaluation of judges since 1887, and then revamped the process in the early 1970s, and we've been using that same process pretty much since then. The purpose is really to inform and educate the public on judicial candidates who are running in the primary and general elections. And we evaluate not just people who want to become judges, but also judges who are already on the bench who have to be retained every 6 years. So we do different types of judicial evaluations.
Mhm. And so I have the benefit of having served on that committee for around 10 years, some 7 to 10, somewhere in that range. I've lost track now. And then I reappear from time to time when they need folks, and have done that recently. So I've got some context and spent most of that time, certainly more than half of it, as an investigator, which involves obviously reviewing the materials that are provided, but also calling references, calling former opposing counsel, or calling other attorneys who have appeared in front of the judge if the judge is sitting. So certainly a lot of work goes into it. It is labor intensive. Certainly the investigative portion is very labor intensive. And there are a lot of
Absolutely.
attorneys putting a lot of time into it. Um, why don't we start with sort of the basics before we get into some specifics about how the judges are evaluated? Can you share with us a little bit about just the role of the judiciary? Why is it important that we have qualified judges who meet, the variety of dimensions of criteria? Um, and how does that factor into rule of law generally, and just what we might call liberal democracy? How does it figure into that?
So one of the things that I tell people when they say, "Well, I don't know who to vote for. I don't know anything about the judges." Um, you know, the average person has had some type of courtroom experience, whether it's a traffic ticket or a divorce. You don't have to be a criminal to be involved in the judicial system. You don't have to be a business person who's having high profile litigation. The judiciary affects just everyday people who have their own experiences. And how many times do you hear these people say, "Oh, our judge was terrible. I had a terrible experience in court." Well, those people actually have a vote and have a say in who we are putting on the bench. So I think a lot of times people think it doesn't really apply to them, that it doesn't, they don't understand, it doesn't matter, it's just for lawyers. But I really do think the judges who are sitting on the bench affect everybody. So I
Right.
think it's very important for people to get involved and have a vote and have an informed vote and an educated vote. Um, and knowing that we have qualified judges who have integrity, who have the legal knowledge that they need to have, and who have the integrity, the temperament, all of those things that we need to have for qualified judges in Cook County.
Right. So now you're touching now on the traits, the sort of dimensions of qualifications for the judges. And I don't want to quiz you, although you probably know them by the back, like the back of your hand. But I'm just going to read off the list, and maybe we can talk about those and how they kind of factor in what they really mean.
Sure.
So the dimensions, or traits that the judges are being assessed with respect to include legal knowledge, legal ability, judicial experience, judicial temperament, diligence, and punctuality.
Right.
Those are the, I believe, 7 factors that are, or elements that are considered. And some of these are, to some degree, self-explanatory, but perhaps in the context of the judiciary may require or benefit from, some elaboration on what that means in that context. So we can go through them either in order, or you can pick some that you really want to talk about, whatever your take is. But we can certainly start with integrity, because that's right at the heart of our professional ethics, whether it's the attorneys or the judicial code.
Right. So when we inquire about integrity, we want to know, is the judge following the law or is the judge ignoring the law to reach a certain outcome? Is the judge influenced by bias or prejudice? Those types of things when we're looking at integrity. We don't usually get too many complaints about integrity. I feel like that's probably I think most Cook County judges have been rated pretty high on integrity. Um, the other area that we inquire quite a bit about is legal knowledge. So, does the judge know the area of law in the courtroom where they're sitting? Are they familiar with updates in the law? Do they know, you know, if there's new cases coming out, are they aware of it? Are they applying the law correctly? So we dig into that as well. Um, the other really big, the other two, I should say, and I sort of lump diligence and punctuality together. We want to know, are the judges delaying cases? Are they taking too much time to make decisions? Or are they actually moving the cases along? Are they progressing the cases? Are they, making people wait too long? Or are they actually, getting people through the system? The other probably biggest area where we get some commentary is in terms of in temperament and demeanor.
Right.
So sometimes, things can get heated in the courtroom and it's busy and there's a lot going on. And sometimes, we get commentary from people that we interview that the judges are hot headed and they're losing their temper and they're yelling at people and they're being rude. And so we spend quite a bit of time asking those types of questions. What, are they polite? Are they respectful? We have a lot of, these days we have a lot of pro se litigants, that is people who don't have lawyers. And so we want to know, are they being respected as well? Are they being treated the same as people who have lawyers? So we do spend quite a bit of time, digging into each of those aspects, because it really, all of those things matter. And when you put them all together, you really get a picture of whether or not the candidate is qualified.
Sure, sure. So there are, a variety of ways to sort of conceptualize the way the judiciary fits into, rule of law and democracy. But one kind of easy sort of shorthand that I've been using is there are two professors from University of Chicago, law professors and political science scholars who Tom Ginsburg and Aziz Haq are their names. They wrote a book, an article, essentially about keys to democracy. It's how to save and lose a constitutional democracy, and they identify rule of law in the judiciary really as one of three pillars of constitutional democracy in no particular order: free speech, free and fair elections, and what they refer as public trust or confidence in the legal and administrative institutions. So when we look at it from that perspective, and when we consider the role of the judiciary in rule of law and more broadly in our constitutional democracy, how does I mean, to me it's fairly self-evident, but I think it's good to get into some detail. How does the work of the Judicial Evaluation Committee advance, protect, guard rule of law, and contribute to a better operation of our democracy?
So we really are looking to make sure that the judges that we're finding qualified are unbiased, that they're being fair to both sides, that they're not favoring the defense or favoring the plaintiff's side because of their background. Um, we have a lot of judges come from public service, so they come from either the state's attorney's office or the public defender's office. And if you spend your career in one of those roles, sometimes it can be hard to be fair to the other side. So we're really sensitive to that, and we really like to make sure that we probe judges to make sure that that they don't have these biases that they're bringing to the bench. Also, we like to make sure judges are not, being political. We have had issues come up throughout the years where we've gotten, complaints from litigants who have appeared before them thinking that there are political motivations. So we really do try to probe into those areas and make sure that when we do find a judge qualified, we really do believe that they are being fair to everyone and completely unbiased.
Right. So let's talk about, we're sort of discussing, or you're touching upon, two related topics, or topics that can be related, um, which are integrity and bias. And I think independence probably kind of falls into that general sort of like, similar category of concern. So let's spend a little time talking about judicial independence, and by that, and you can, whatever conceptualization you have is great. I'm kind of thinking generally um, about politics, freedom from political pressures, to the extent that they can undermine a clinical rule of law analysis on a case, and also any variety of bias. Like, for example, um, and we've all done, as a legal community, and perhaps more broadly, a lot of awareness of implicit bias training. And I think hopefully over the last 4 or 5 years have come to terms with some of the ways that bias works into our own individual paradigms, that we have to constantly be kind of liberating ourselves from our biases. So everyone has, and what we've learned sort of is that everyone has biases that we can be more and more conscious of and change. Um, how do we how should we conceptualize sort of rule of law versus politics? Because there's a gray area there, and I know it's a little bit of a tricky question, so not to just throw it at you, but and I can help with that too, because I certainly have ideas. But how can we think about law versus policy and when they kind of relate? Because certainly in every legal argument, especially on appeal, you are also looking at policy in terms of trying to get a legal decision.
Well, I think, judges obviously, a lot of them get to the bench by running in an election, and they have to pick a party to do that.
Right.
So I think it sort of starts out political to some degree, but once they get on the bench, they are here to serve the public and the entire public, not just the party that they affiliate with. And so that is, one of the things that we inquire about too is what are their outside activities, what are their civic duties, what are their community involvement, things like that, and to get a better idea of, are they really serving the entire public, or do they have an agenda?
Right.
And so it's important to find that out, and there's, you can tell, by inquiring into those things, what do you do outside the bench, what have you done in terms of community involvement, things like that, because it's really important that there is no politics involved with judges on the bench. It really, I can't say it enough. They're public servants, and so and it's the entire public. So I think part of what we do is to try to spot those issues when they do come up, because it does happen from time to time when it's pretty clear that there are agendas going on. And it's really important that the law is applied consistently among litigants, no matter who you are, whether you're from a different party, whether you're from a different race, whether you don't have an attorney or you have an attorney. It's really important that the rule of law is applied consistently by these judges.
Sure, absolutely. So moving sort of from the broader political to sort of personal, bias issues which may arise. I mean, just as an example, and I don't know that this is a source of bias, just an experience that I had, but um, my practice is civil, so I do plaintiff's personal injury and medical malpractice. It's not criminal. Although I did, for a summer in law school, do an externship as a Rule 711 clerkship at the state's attorney's office in a felony trial courtroom. So it was heavy duty lifting, and 26 in
Sure.
California is a very serious environment, to put it that
Yes.
way. Um, and it was very eye opening in a lot of ways. Um, Without getting into great detail, there's a culture that emerges there. It's got a bunch of dimensions to it. And I can very easily see how practicing in a certain area or in a certain environment, whether it's a physical location or a particular building or a practice area, can sort of inform it, and perhaps to some degree define some aspects of our relationship with the law and how we, perceive it, how we perceive ourselves in relation to either the state or the court system or each other. And I can certainly see, especially because we have, so many judges coming from, let's say, the state's attorney's office or public defender, which is great too, because they're trial judges. They're judges who
Right.
fight a lot of cases. Um, and especially because you have real passionate, true believer folks who have those gigs a lot of the time, the prosecutors and public defenders. There's a lot of passion, perhaps even some bias that can emerge, and we can see any variety of situations. A classic example, you know, um, which we read about from time to time, is a judge who maybe has a relationship with a prison industrial complex situation. I mean, that's one of the most horrific scenes we can think about, but
Right.
we can imagine all types of things from elements of corruption and sort of political bias, all the way to sort of just the way that we relate, to reality, to the courts, and to society. So how does, the presence of the Judicial Evaluation Committee itself, just by being there, advance the ethics of judicial independence and freedom from bias and integrity? All those.
Well, so as I mentioned earlier, there are when once judges are on the bench, they have to run for retention every 6 years, and um, they know that they have to come before us if they want a qualified rating, and they know that we're going to call litigants who appear before them, and we're going to conduct interviews, and we're going to call their supervisor. And in some instances, we call their colleagues. And if there is something that does come back that's questionable, we go even farther. And they also, in some instances, have to come and appear before us for a hearing. So I think that it holds them somewhat accountable to know that there is this process and they're not automatically getting voted in again every 6 years. But and it's not just our committee, there are other committees that conduct judicial evaluations. And so I think, they, on some level, they know that this is coming every 6 years. Um, and there are times when we actually find candidates not recommended and we tell them why. And we've had candidates improve upon those areas and come back, and then we've found them qualified because they have put the effort in, they've put the time in to bettering themselves and whatever the issues are. And we, interview new people again to make sure that, these changes have taken place, and it's happened quite a few times, and it's actually very fulfilling to us on the committee to see that they are listening to our feedback and they are actually taking steps to improve the areas that we find to be, you know somewhat unacceptable.
Sure.
Um, so I think that the judges do care about the process and they do try to remain qualified candidates once they are on the bench. So I do think there is some accountability.
Oh yeah, I would say, just based on my experience, there's certainly, there's a high degree of respect that I see that the candidates have for the Judicial Evaluation Committee, and I can't think of a single instance in which we had a hearing where we didn't have someone who was there in good faith, whatever the outcome was. So
Right.
that's a good sign.
Yes.
And that kind of makes me think about the idea of cultivating a fellowship within the practice, locally or even more broadly, a fellowship of rule of law and sort of the broader principles for what we lawyers are doing. And you talked at the because we have our cases, of course, but beyond that, we have affirmatively set forth responsibilities to the public and also just things that we carry with us that hopefully motivate and inspire our practice. And we have a few minutes left. Um, so I'd like to kind of maybe take you back to something you mentioned at the beginning, which is sort of how you became attracted and fell into is probably not the right phrase, but the Judicial Evaluation Committee. And maybe you can share, at the risk of asking for too personal of anecdotes, just your own sort of impression about how your role with the Judicial Evaluation Committee has helped cultivate and advance and refine some of your ideas and principles as to the role of rule of law in society, and the role of lawyers in the judiciary and the democracy in our democracy. And I know those are big questions, but I mean, just in terms of your own feelings and your own sort of motivations.
Well, I initially got involved because I was a young lawyer and I wanted to connect with other people. I was in a very small law firm and didn't have a huge network. So I got into it for that reason. I quickly realized how important it was, and I think one of my first investigations that I did was pretty scandalous. It was a candidate who had he had gotten his secretary pregnant, and there was also a fraud case, and there were all kinds of things, and it was literally my first investigation, and I was thinking, holy cow, like, is this how they're all going to be? And of
Nice.
course not, but
Quite an
um,
introduction. Yeah.
it was quite the introduction. And over the years, I've had a couple of other major and some high profile investigations that I've worked on. But for me, I have such high respect for members of the legal community who have accomplished great things, not just judges, but lawyers who appear before us. And I feel like there's so many different types of lawyers and so many different types of law. I'm always learning something from meeting the candidates and interviewing the candidates, interviewing the judges, and it really just it inspires me personally to be a better lawyer, and to have more integrity and to be more professional, and all to be more diligent and all those things. So I think it's personally very rewarding for me to be on this committee. And I have great respect for my colleagues on the committee. I think we have a tremendous group of people. We have almost 200 members, including about 150 investigators who really do the hard work and
Yeah.
make the phone calls and do the research. So it's really very rewarding for me personally.
Great. Great. Where can people in our last couple minutes here find the evaluations? When do they come out? And what would you like to say just to close?
So, in closing, I would like to share that I was an election judge for this past election, and it was very heartbreaking to me to hear so many people say that they didn't know what to do with the judicial ballot. A lot of people didn't even want to take it, a lot of people left it blank. I can't tell you how many people said on the way out, I'm sorry, but I didn't know what to do.
Yeah.
It broke my heart because I've been on this committee a long time and I know how much work we put into it. So we do post our ratings on our website. I believe in the past they've been published by local media.
Mhm.
That is something that I think I would like to try to improve on this year,
Yeah.
because I really
Getting the message out.
we need to get the message out. Yes,
It's a perennial challenge. I mean, it's just the nature of it. Yeah.
true, right.
Yeah.
But I post it on my social media. I share it with all my friends and family. I encourage everyone to do the same. But we do get our ratings out, and so they are out there. We just need to make sure the public can find them.
Well, it's good. It's good real work that's important for the public, and I know personally from having done it, and from having spent time around all you folks, that a lot of good folks are doing hard work for the public good. So I thank you for that, and I thank you for your leadership, and also for coming on and sharing your insight with us on you and the law. Thank you very much.
You're welcome, and thanks for having me, and thanks for being on the committee.
All right, thanks, and thanks for everyone for tuning in to You and the Law. We appreciate it.